The Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Baltimore Ravens 17-10 and keep their best chances for the playoffs alive. We'll talk about that, TJ Watt's injury, and a lot more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOn. NFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a Victory Sunday podcast. Kind of Saturday if you're listening to it late Saturday night, but you get my point. Your Pittsburgh Steelers went into Baltimore, gutted out a 17-10 victory to finish the season at 10-7, sweeping the Ravens, finishing with a 5-1 division record, and the Pittsburgh Steelers now just need one of three things to happen. One of those three things is literally happening as I am recording this. I am recording this during the Texans-Colts games because I am assuming that game will not result in a tie. If it does, I'm going to go nuts. But presuming that that's not going to happen because that's highly unlikely, we will do a whole new I promise you I'll do a whole new show if that does happen and they are in the playoffs. It all comes down to either the Titans beating the Jaguars or the Dolphins beating the Bills. We'll get to all those scenarios later. But let's talk about this win real quick because this was an impressive win in crazy situations. And yes, the Ravens were playing backups, so were the Steelers. And there were a lot of things going into this game. But with that weather, with that craziness on the road, this was a chance where the Steelers, with two fumbles in scoring position, this is a chance for the Steelers to blow an opportunity, and they didn't do that. They kept fighting. They found a way to win. Najee Harris, powerful in this game. Back-to-back 100-yard rushing performances for him now. He has become kind of the face and the leader of this offense in a lot of ways. Mason Rudolph also deserves a ton of credit. 18 of 20, 152 passing yards, one touchdown, a passer rating of 115. It's his third straight game with a passer rating of over 100. I think at least 112 if I have to look back at all the games. But he is playing so efficient, and he wasn't elite in this game. But again, he does what you expect him to do. Did he have a bad turnover? Sure. But you know what? He hung in there in a tight game. He didn't make all the crazy mistakes he could have. And even when things were struggling and people were wondering, man, should Kenny Pickett go back in there? He hits Deontay Johnson on a slant, who takes it for a house call and a big game score that put the Steelers up for good in that game. Also, to give him credit, he had another option open underneath right away, and he didn't take it. He saw something else in the defense and said, hey, we knew that they were keying in on Pickens. We knew that they were keying in on Freiermuth. So I waited for that to get open, and he hit him. Big kudos to Mason Rudolph making a veteran play there and being a leader from the quarterback position. But Najee Harris deserves a ton of credit, man, because this was a game, 26 carries, 112 rushing yards, and a touchdown, a 4.3 yards per carry average. Also caught 5 passes of his 5 targets for 21 yards. One of those was a big red zone conversion that gave the Steelers a goal-to-go situation. He has really helped resurrect this offense, as has Mason Rudolph. I think Najee Harris is very much also the leading component of it. He's the guy that everyone's getting behind, everyone's kind of feeling, and he's kind of leading the charge. And it's really set the tone for the Steelers right now. And this is one of those situations now. You're 10-7, and you are feeling strong about how you're playing. The defense stringing things together despite all the injuries, even with TJ Watt going out late in the third quarter. And we'll get to his injury. We'll have Dr. Kerina Maharaja, who's been on the show, to come on and explain what his injury is and what the impact is moving forward. We'll have that in the second segment. But I want to focus on just the fact that this defense on top of the offense, There's so much concerted effort to get the job done, to finish your job, to do the routine things routinely, and it's coming through. And it's part of this goes back to the coaching job. The Steelers staying focused to find a way to gut out wins, even when things are going against you, with those two scoring possession fumbles. With the bad weather, with this, it looked like at one point the Steelers might be snake bit. They turned out to be able to fight through all of it. Eric Rowe. We were told the Steelers informed us in the locker room that his nickname is actually Death Row now. He has played very well for the Steelers. 12 tackles in this game, forced a fumble, was all over the place for the Steelers defense. Deserves a ton of credit for what he brought back, even when he returned from injury with a neck injury in the game. TJ Watt, 2 sacks, 8 tackles, phenomenal. Give him the Defensive Player of the Year. I don't care. Myles Garrett ain't had 2 sacks in his last 6 games combined. He has 19 sacks on the season. Right now, that leads the NFL. We'll see if Trey Hendrickson catches him with his game against the Browns tomorrow. But either way, TJ Watt has been a game wrecker all season long, and he's got the numbers to back it up. I think he's proven that. Marcus Golden gets a sack in crucial time. Mark Robinson with a huge forced fumble and a big sack. 5 tackles to go along with it. The Steelers, again, just getting answers from so many different places. That is the important part of this. And I think that is where the Steelers are looking at this and saying, like, hey, we've been able to focus and find a way to gut out wins. And that's important for a team right now, because that was a game. If that weather is a little bit clear, I bet you they air it out a little bit more. But they find different ways to win, and that's what good teams are supposed to do. Now, are the Steelers a good team? I think right now they are. They haven't been all season. If you were to take them for 17 seasons, I'd say they're slightly above average, but I'd say that the way they've played the last 3 games, with Mason Rudolph taking over, with the feel that they've gotten on offense, with the consistent effort that they put out on defense, I look at this team as the last 3 games. This is a good team because they find ways to win. And this was a game where the Ravens, even with their backups, they made a concerted effort to double team George Pickens all game long. Mason Rudolph never bit on it. He never fell for it. He said, hey, you know what? You want to take him away? Fine. I'm going to go where you're not. And he hit everyone else. George Pickens didn't even get a target in this game. He just got a carry that got a first down on a 3rd and short. But they didn't fall for the bait. They didn't try to force it to their playmaker. And also, George Pickens, not one lick of pounding, not one lick of anything, any noise. In fact, when Deontay Johnson scored his touchdown, first person to greet him and celebrate with him was George Pickens. So a lot of the stuff that was worrying about his attitude, would he ever get fixed? It's looked a lot better the last 3 weeks, and George Pickens fitting right in with the Steelers. And this is a team right now that they're a tough team. And if I'm an AFC team, I would not want to have to play the Steelers week 1. I'd rather get, maybe the Colts or the Texans or one of the other teams, or the Jaguars, because the Steelers right now, their offense is humming, their defense is finding ways to make plays. And Minka Fitzpatrick also, he didn't play in this game, but he did say he would be available if the Steelers made the playoffs. Could be a very interesting team to watch down the stretch. But will they have TJ Watt? That's a question that some people online are saying this, that. He could play if he wanted to. He can't play at all. We actually got our doctor, Dr. Kerina Maharaja, on the show. She'll give you her perspective when we're back here on the second segment here of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stay tuned. We got a lot to discuss here on the show. But first, we want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why you need the right people to hire onto your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders, and LinkedIn Jobs is here to make that easier to find those people that you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to help reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring, so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our discussion after the Steelers' victory on Saturday and with a Victory Sunday podcast here. And we will still kind of do a Victory Monday podcast, I guess, but we'll see if the Steelers make the playoffs. We'll get into the playoff scenarios for a sec. But everyone, as soon as TJ Watt went down in the third quarter, all of Pittsburgh, their breath held. You could feel like, oh, that could be it. That could be the whole season. It doesn't matter what happened there. They need TJ Watt. He is the heart and soul of the team. He's the biggest playmaker. He's the best player on the team, best defensive player in the league. They need him. And you could see him pounding on the ground. He kind of gets up. He does walk off on his own power. But with all the news and information, we heard from J.J. Watt. We heard some different stuff. I wanted to get our own doctor, Dr. Kerina Maharaja, who's been on the show several times before, to give us her explanation of what the injury actually is and what the likelihood of his recovery would have to be. Here's Dr. Kerina Maharaja with me on the show. We're now joined by a good friend of the podcast who's been on several times before, Dr. Kerina Maharaja, who's been on this show several times. She's a doctor in physical therapy. Dr. Kerina, we got to talk to you about TJ Watt's situation because all of Pittsburgh feared the worst when he was seen pounding the turf in the third quarter of the Steelers game against the Ravens. J.J. Watt, his brother, has revealed to us that it is a grade 3 MCL sprain and not a tear. So the internet, and there's a lot of people saying that the internet is going to take 6 weeks, but can you tell us first what actually an MCL, a grade 3 MCL sprain is?
Yeah, let's talk about where your MCL is. It's the bone. It is a ligament that connects your femur and your tibia. It's on the inside of your knee. So there are 3 grades to an MCL sprain. Let's think of them as mild, moderate, and severe. So grade 3 is the most severe kind. But the good thing in the case of an MCL sprain is, although it's the most severe and usually means a full, a full injury of the ligament, in that it could have been spliced. It could have been completely torn. We just won't know that till we see the MRI and know more in that information. But usually there is not surgical fixation required unless other ligaments are involved, like an ACL. So we just have to get more on the imaging. But if it's just the MCL, if it's just the sprain, I think conservative treatment is possible, which is rest, ice, elevation, maybe getting some compression or a brace on there for him to make it more stable in the coming weeks. And I think that aggressive physical therapy could have him back in 6 weeks.
So here's the question. The 6 weeks thing, that is like what you look up on the internet and you see what a normal person is. Is that also what a professional athlete is going to be? Like, if you're a doctor, you say there's no way this guy is playing not only next week, but like if somehow the Steelers kept going in the playoffs 2, 3, 4 weeks, there's no way that he should be back on a field.
If we're really looking at a grade 3 sprain, I don't think he would be back on the field in the next few weeks. Okay. I think that healing from a sprain of this caliber can take 6 weeks to, I hate to say it, a few months. But again, that depends on the person, the caliber of your therapy. Let's look at TJ Watt, though. He's already in a much better position in terms of his shape and conditioning to his joints and his muscles and his overall conditioning. So his recovery might not be the same as me, just a normal non-athlete. So that could work in his favor.
That's what the Steelers have to be hoping for, is something there. It seems that we do know that there were reports that TJ Watt was trying to go back into the game even with his injury. That's also just TJ Watt. He's an ultimate competitor, and that thing can kind of happen. Is that normal for like an athlete with that kind of an injury to maybe like try to power through? Like, can you like generally walk on it with full strength even with that kind of an injury?
Yeah, so what he's going to start feeling probably this evening, tomorrow, is some more swelling coming into that joint, and that's going to be more limiting. But immediately, you don't really you feel some soreness, and the other big symptom is instability of your joint. It feels like it's catching or locking, giving way, and so that is probably the number one thing he started to feel, but you can still walk on it. You saw him walk off the field,
right?
And it didn't look like anything was wrong. But probably in the couple of hours since it's happened, there's an onset of swelling, further instability, difficulty getting that leg in full extension. And just I think the biggest worry if you sent him back in would be the instability of that joint and then tearing an ACL along with that, with having that sprain of the MCL.
Okay, sounds like, according to Dr. K, TJ Watt, most likely, if the Steelers are in the playoffs, he will not be available next week, maybe not even for the rest of the season, because they only have the next 3 weeks and then the Super Bowl. So unfortunate news there. We'll get the official word from the Steelers, but Dr. Kerina, thank you so much for all your insight. Let people know where they should follow you and see more of you online.
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Kerina Maharaja, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Kerina Maharaja, and follow all my physical therapy journey on there.
So with all that being said, it does seem unlikely that TJ Watt would be able to play through this injury. Now, there's the sense that, like Kerina was saying, maybe, he's superhuman and he's able to perform on this at a rate. But do you want 50% TJ Watt fighting on that injury and risking himself at an injury that could, damage the rest of his career? Or do you want to try to win with the depth that you have and see maybe if 2 weeks helps him get back to at least maybe 80% or something like that? Would you rather see that? My thing here is wait till the doctors say what they say and then go from there. But from this point, is not a good standing for TJ Watt to play next week if the Steelers were to make the playoffs. And that's an unfortunate situation because it was just a happenstance play that kind of just bad luck. Montravius Adams banging into his knee the way he did. And it's unfortunate, but the Steelers have shown they have depth there. Just last week, Nick Herbig had a sack, forced fumble, and a fumble recovery that put the Steelers in position to win that game. This week, Marcus Golden had a sack to give that forced the Ravens to kick a field goal late in the game instead of trying to go for a touchdown, and that was a big part of them winning the game. So you've seen the reserves come in and make plays. Maybe the Steelers are much better suited than they ever have been with TJ Watt as their starter and their superstar to be able to fill in for at least a game or two if he's not able to play. Again, I'm not saying that he is or isn't out. All I'm saying is that was Dr. Kerina Maharaja giving her professional opinion as a doctor in physical therapy, and hearing from her and just gauging things off of what we've seen and heard so far on TJ Watt. But with all that being said, I really do think the Steelers are a team that you don't want to face if you're an AFC team and you're trying to figure things out to start your playoffs, because this team is hungry, they believe in themselves, and they got nothing to lose. I'll talk more about that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast after the next break. I'm Chris Carter. Stick with me. We got a lot to discuss. But first, we want to remind you that this show is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Life is full of twists and turns, and it's important to show up for yourself through all of them. I've been faced plenty of times in my life when I've tried to shoulder a lot of burdens and found the best answers thanks to the help of good therapists. That's where BetterHelp Online Therapy can come in for you. They assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done online, available to people worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your therapist. With therapy, it can take a few tries to find the right fit for you. BetterHelp makes it easy and free to change therapists if needed. And they have a special way for our listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BETTERHELP.com/lockedon. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue the show here talking about the Steelers and their playoff chances. So now, again, I'm presuming that this game ended in not a tie for the Colts and Texans game. I swear to God, if it ends in a tie and I have to redo this show, I'm going to hate myself. But let's just say it didn't, and let's go with the logical reason. One of those teams won the game. it comes down to just two factors now. You can exclude the Broncos-Raiders game. That is out now. The Steelers won. Doesn't matter. We thank Sarah Bettinger for his input on that game, just in case the Steelers did lose this one. But now you look to the Steelers game. Now you look to the Steelers' two needs, or one of two needs here. They need the Titans to beat the Jaguars, or they need the Dolphins to beat the Bills. And if either one of those happen, doesn't need both, just one of them, the Steelers go to the playoffs, and it could be. Now, there's three different scenarios in it right now for the Steelers to make the playoffs, again, presuming that the tie doesn't happen tonight as I'm recording this. You could face either the Bills, the Dolphins, or the Chiefs in the first round. If the Dolphins win and the Jaguars win, the Steelers will play the Dolphins as the 7th seed in the AFC playoffs, and that will allow them to travel to Miami as the 7th seed. So then, but there's also the configuration: if the Bills win and the Jaguars win, the Steelers are out because they'd be out of the playoffs. But if the Bills win and the Jaguars lose, then the Steelers would be the 7th seed traveling to Buffalo, as they'd be the 2 seed. There's also the possibility, though, of the Dolphins winning and the Jaguars losing, which would then make the Steelers the 6th seed, as the Bills would then get into the playoffs as the 7th seed, and the Steelers would have a better conference record. So the Steelers would then go to the Chiefs if that situation happens. I really think of those three scenarios, the two that you'd most like if you're the Steelers, and you like any of them at this point, right? You just take getting in the playoffs. But I think the Steelers could match up very well with the Chiefs and the Dolphins, potentially the Bills if they are not on their game. The Bills are a team I've seen be mercurial in that they could be really good or really bad or kind of below mid. And if they catch them on either of those last two, the Steelers would have a good chance to fight in that game and pull out a win. But if the Bills come on point, I think when the Bills are on fire this year, they're one of the best teams in football. So if Josh Allen's doing his thing and he's cooking and you can't do anything about it, that's just going to be that. But the Dolphins, they're facing a lot of injuries right now. It's why I'm a little shaky about the Dolphins even winning that game in the first place. But it's a division game. The Dolphins have been playing well at home, and they haven't lost back-to-back games all season. There's some intangibles there that Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins went over with us in our Friday episode that could play into them pulling that off. So there's that. But there's also the Chiefs. And the main way that you hurt the Steelers right now is by passing over the middle and heading them up with different receivers. And right now the Chiefs have one receiver that scares you, and it's Travis Kelce at tight end. And if you focus, and if Minka Fitzpatrick's back and you can focus on taking him away and forcing Patrick Mahomes to beat you with Justin Watson and Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore, I think the Steelers will actually take that kind of a matchup and trying to win the line of scrimmage more often, to try to take away the primary option, force him to win with guys that are dropping footballs at high rates, and then trust your offense to be able to get just enough on the road again to get you enough scoring to win the game. So I think either one of the Dolphins or the Chiefs would be a good matchup. But you're probably sitting there, but Chris, what if TJ Watt can't go? And in all likelihood, I hear you. That's tough. The Steelers have a terrible record without TJ Watt. I think it's like they've won maybe 11% of the time when TJ Watt hasn't played in the game. But I also think that this might be the best suited Steelers team to deal with TJ Watt's injury in his entire career with the Steelers. Well, since he became the TJ Watt. When he was a rookie, they could have dealt with it. But since he became like the superstar player that everyone relies upon, wow, this game is still tied late in the third quarter. But since he became that guy, the Steelers have not been prepared for those situations. Remember, they brought in Malik Reed last year when TJ Watt went out in the middle of the season with a bad injury that took him out for 2 months. And that was actually early in the season, it was after the first game. But that team was not prepared for that. They were hoping that him and Alex Highsmith could hold it down and that they could develop something behind them. It didn't happen. This year, they've developed something. They've gotten in Marcus Golden, who's very much understood his role, not like Melvin Ingram, and has been able to fill in key ways. And also the emergence of Nick Herbig, who has just played very well for the Steelers. They have answers there. Now, of course, you'd love to have TJ Watt, and I think that not having TJ Watt is so consistent at all the basics and fundamentals of football that when you run the ball, you don't want to just run it right at TJ Watt all the time. You want to find different ways to try to get him out of the way, run around him, run away from him, but not run to his gap, because he's probably going to win that assignment. But You know, what he adds on top of the fundamentals, he adds the splash plays, which is why he's if things hold up, if he continues, if Trey Hendrickson doesn't get 3 sacks, it'll be, I think, the 3rd time in TJ Watt's career that he will have led the NFL in sacks, and that's just insane. But with all that being said, I think that this team has been built on finding ways to win. I mean, this team, I think, has only had TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, and Minkah Fitzpatrick healthy to start and finish the game twice this season, and yet they're 10-7, hoping for a chance at the playoffs and feeling good about it. And I think a big part of feeling good about it has been Mason Rudolph bringing in and just bringing some stability to the offense. Has been Najee Harris and the run game just being revived. And this is even with Jaylen Warren having a rough day with 2 fumbles, one of which was lost and cost the Steelers points. You know, and this is with George Pickens, you know, who everyone thought was just going to be crazy and was just, you know, he was just, you know, a bad teammate. And all of a sudden he's blocking for guys. He's doing all the things that he's supposed to be doing. And, you know, he's heading in the right direction. Deontay Johnson, everyone was saying he'll never score a touchdown. Here he is scoring a big touchdown to give the Steelers a lead in a big moment. The Steelers have overcome a lot of narratives that were put out there about them. And I think that's why this team is so dangerous right now, because against the Bengals the first time, they went to Pat Freiermuth, he killed them. The second time, they used him as a decoy. They killed them with other players and scored even more points. And then with this game with the Ravens, you heard Mason Rudolph after the game talking about how they were taking away George Pickens. We went elsewhere. The ability to beat you multiple ways is what makes you the more dangerous team in situations. Last year, the Steelers had one way to beat you. Their defense was going to kick the snot out of you, and then you were going to get maybe a couple touchdowns here or there. And then if the run game worked, great, but it wasn't consistent. This year, the running game has emerged with the presence of Broderick Jones and Isaac Seumalo on the line. They have really boosted the group. Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren have developed into a great 1-2 punch. And then George Pickens has grown up a bit as a wide receiver, along with Deontay Johnson being the solid vet that he is. And then Pat Freiermuth emerging as a better blocker for the Steelers. Darnell Washington, Connor Hayward being good complements at that position. You have an offense that has a lot of different things. And then again, on defense, you got Alex Highsmith. Even without TJ Watt, Herbig, Golden, Hayward, who's been quieter but still been solid, at least in holding down his spot at times. Your linebackers have stepped up for you. Landon Roberts only 1 tackle in this game, but it was a big one on a screen that if he doesn't make this tackle, it might break open for a big play. Mark Robinson filling in for a strong game. Miles Jack playing really strong this season coming off the bench. Again, Eric Rowe, what he's done. Patrick Peterson, Joey Porter Jr. This is a team that's found so many different ways to come through in big moments. That's why I think that if they do get into the playoffs, they are dangerous. Now, again, they have to make the playoffs for that to even happen. They didn't do their job all season long, but in the last 3 weeks, they did everything possible to get it done. And that's the sign of a team coming together after the adversity and finding ways to win. There's a lot to still discuss with this team. We'll do that throughout the weekend. If the Steelers do make the playoffs before Sunday night when the Dolphins and Bills play, I will be giving a short episode, whether it's tonight after this tie, if it's a tie, I don't think it's going to be a tie, or if it's after the Titans-Jaguars game, which is early in the afternoon. So we'll give you a quick response there. And then, of course, we'll have a full response and full episode after we know the Steelers' fate Sunday night, with not only if they're in the playoffs, but if they are, who they'd be playing, and get you ready for the week there. Thanks again for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We appreciate Dr. Kerina Maharaja for joining us yet again. We'll see you back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast very soon. Remember to follow us on, follow us on your favorite podcasting app. Subscribe, like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of our daily episodes, as well as bonus episodes like this one that we had coming out over the weekend. We'll see you again here very soon on the Locked On Steelers podcast.